Hi there and welcome to the latest Blue Soul Shoes video here on LinkedIn. And before I go into this video, the first thing I wanted to say is just a massive thank you to so many of you for responding to my request to like and to share this page. You know, it's something I set up. I had to make myself quite vulnerable to do that because I wanted to share my experience to help others. The great news is it's only been a short time, but I'm already receiving private messages from people who are going through similar mental health problems and asking for support and advice. And so if this page is about anything, it's about that. And that wouldn't be happening if you guys weren't prepared to share and like what I'm posting. So thank you. Please keep doing that. So with this video today, even if it doesn't resonate with you totally, if you can, please like it and share it, because there are people out there that need this advice and support. And if we can help them in just some way, then that'd be absolutely fabulous if we could do that. In this video, I want to really talk about the issue of men and mental health, because that's something that really hit me when I went through this. The amount of men who are challenged by their mental health but are unable to do something about it. We know that 20%, 1 in 5 men, are diagnosed with a mental health condition. But we also know that 40% of men, almost half of men, won't talk about their mental health. And that number is too high. The scariest statistic that I've seen, which I think should be a massive wake-up call for all of us, is that in the UK right now, 3/4 of suicides are men. Let me say that again. That's a scary, scary stat. 3/4 of suicides are men. And we have to say that's not okay. We have to say that in effect, that's a pandemic that men are experiencing. And it doesn't have to be that way. It can and it must be changed. And we must do more as a society and as individuals to support everybody going through this, but especially men. If 3/4 of suicide attempts, if 3/4 of people taking their lives via suicide, if 3/4 are men, that's a really, really scary stat. The 3 reasons I want to cover in this video about why I think men, and in my experience, men struggle to talk or deal with their mental health. And I've written some of this stuff down, so I'll be referring to my notes every now and then, and I trust that's okay. But I just want to help inform and educate you, and again would encourage you to share these videos if you can, because it might just help someone. You know, the first reason is something, looking back, that I said when I was really ill. And I can't believe I said it, but when you're desperate, often the truth comes out. And I said, I can't believe this, depression, anxiety, psychosis, I can't believe this is happening to people like me. And what did I mean by that? I think deep down I had a perception that this anxiety, depression stuff only happens to a sort of person, happens to a weak person, happens to someone that might just be susceptible to this. If you've got the flu, no one ever says, oh, I'm surprised that happened to someone like you. If you get chicken pox, no one says, oh, I'm surprised someone like you got chicken pox. Of course they don't say that, because anybody can get it. And it is exactly the same with mental health conditions. I was loud, confident, happy, good sense of humour. Sounds like a dating app, doesn't it? Don't swipe left. But I never thought anxiety and depression could happen to somebody like me. But you know, mental health conditions do not discriminate. Let me say that again. They do not discriminate. They happen to young people. They happen to old people. They happen to rich people. They happen to poor people. They happen to confident people. They happen to shy people. They happen to tall people, they happen to small people, they happen to straight people, they happen to gay people. It can happen to absolutely anybody. And so there's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing a lot of people can do about this. We're going to look in future videos how you can look after your mental health more. But if anxiety and depression comes your way, it comes your way. It's not your fault. And the GPs I've seen a lot of tell me that so many people come in with that feeling, this thing shouldn't happen to me. Well, the news is if you're going through this, it ain't your fault. If you're going through this, it doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're susceptible to this. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with your DNA. It just happens to people, and the sooner we realise that, the better. The second reason why men really struggle is about one key word. It's about something called vulnerability. Vulnerability. I say it too many times, it doesn't make sense. But, you know, as men, we quite rightly have a different makeup than women. Of course we're different, but two of those things we often do as men is, first of all, we think we're unconquerable. We think nothing can knock us back. We think that we're always going to be okay. The second thing we do is we often ignore things around us in the hope that it will go away. We often ignore aches and pains and just think, oh, I don't want to deal with that. I've got too many responsibilities. And we are scared of making ourselves vulnerable. I suppose some of that comes back from male DNA. We're hunter-gatherers, you know, we know it's our responsibility deep down to go out and bring the bread in. That sounds really sexist, doesn't it? But you know what I mean. And so we don't want to let people down. A lot of it goes back to our parenting and the amount of people I've spoke to who still believe that big boys don't cry. That's what I was taught. And it hasn't served me at all well. It left me going through a lack of an emotional ability to deal with what was going on in my life. It's a big thing to be vulnerable. It's a challenge to go to the GP. It's hard to sit there with a GP and cry and tell them how miserable you're feeling. It's hard enough doing it in front of your family, let alone in front of a stranger who's a GP. But my message to you is not only is it okay to be vulnerable, but it's important to be vulnerable. If you're going to have good mental health, it's about having a breadth of emotions that you can draw on. And that's recognising that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be upset. They're normal emotions. And if you can accept that and start to think around that, then it will help you much more address what might be going on in your life. Because some people ignore that, especially guys ignore it. From the people I speak to, that often leads to something called self-medication. What's self-medication? That's when people start using other things to make themselves feel better. So I've met a lot of people that will use drink, they'll use alcohol, they'll use food. Some people go in further and take illicit narcotics. So they'll start from marijuana. I've met some people that try cocaine, all in the hope to dull that feeling that's going on. And you know what? Having a drink, having a fag, scoffing down a chocolate cake, probably taking cocaine, I don't know. In the short term, probably does make you feel better after a day of feeling rancid, and that's what depression and anxiety can often do to you. But in the longer term, it deals with nothing and it makes you worse. And we see increasing levels of obesity and alcohol abuse and drug abuse amongst men. That's no accident that that's linked to the rising numbers in mental health. So how do we stop men self-medicating? We tell them it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to feel scared about this. There's lots of people in that same boat. The third point is, I suppose, something we can have less impact on, but it's about recognising society's definition of men and what a successful man is like. What does a successful man look like? Far too much. The world around us tells us that a successful man is someone who is well off, someone who's got lots of money, and someone who has got a successful career. That's how society defines what success is. And it's wrong. It's wrong. I saw this recently. It probably won't come out on the screen very well. It probably comes backwards. But this is the Forbes World's Billionaire list. And the Times, there's a Sunday Times rich list that we know as well. And it is interesting to look at. But why do we hold in such a high esteem people who earn so much money? What about a list of the 10 most emotionally sorted people in the world. Wouldn't that be great? Or how about here's the 100 happiest people in the world? And I bet all of them wouldn't be rich. I bet all these rich people on here, I bet there's a lot of them that are not happy. And so it's trying to get guys to understand that you can earn loads and you can have a successful career and you can work harder, but that don't necessarily mean your mental health's going to follow, and that's going to be successful as well. Society portrays mental health, especially in men, as a weakness. It does, and that needs to change. On the front of the Daily Mail recently, again, that would be backwards, but it says Generation Sick Note. And it was a report about young adults, young men in school who are not able to attend school as much because they suffer from anxiety and depression. And the headline was about how people have become snowflakery and how they're not going to school because they're snowflakes or they're somehow weak. We wouldn't say school children are weak because they're having time off because they've got chicken pox, or they get time off because they've got a throat infection. It shouldn't be any different for mental health conditions. And yet society tells us that's a weakness, and we have to try and push back on that. So there are 3 reasons that I hope are informative, and these videos are just really aiming to be a little bit more informative. And the first reason, just to recap, is to say lots of people will say bad mental health doesn't happen to people like me. The answer is it can, and it does, and it can happen to absolutely anybody. And I'm thankfully living proof of that, and that you can get better. The second reason we looked at is that society tells us big boys don't cry. Well, they do, and being vulnerable is all part of being an adult. And when you act as an adult, you're much more likely to want to get help. And being an adult means you draw on a range of emotions that you need. And the third reason is that worldview of mental health, and to reinforce that message that money and success doesn't make you a rounded person. So I hope this helps. If you've been interested in it, or if you think there's points that might help someone, please just give it a like. Please share it, and that will help somebody else. I promise you, you never know who needs this support. And I suppose my message to everyone, or to guys especially at the end of this video, is to say if you had a chest infection, you wouldn't ignore it, would you? Because you know it could turn into pneumonia. If you had a broken leg, you wouldn't just ignore it and soldier on, because eventually it would become a disability. Mental health is no different. If your mental health is suffering in any way, shape or form, reach out for help. Even if you need to talk to someone, go and see the GP. GPs can help people. They help so many people as an early stage of stopping mental health get worse. And that would be my encouragement to you. So thank you again for listening. I trust this has been helpful, and I'll see you next time.